what happens as a landlord when you default? When you're in this position where you are now missing rent and you're trying to approach your lender, what are some best practices around that type of information? And Mark, I'm going to have you start this conversation off for us.
I'm sorry, we're talking about a default with a landlord. You haven't paid your rent?
Yeah, landlord lenders. How do we start that off with, and in the commercial context?
Well, I mean, again, it's kind of back to what I was saying. You don't want to default. You want to give notice. There's no reason to hide. It's kind of like what John was saying. Be prepared to give the information. So the best defense is a good offense. And so you don't want to get to that point where it's past the due date. You don't want to give that notice. But if you look at these ordinances and you look at these statutes and just the way that the relief is out there, there usually is some sort of a grace period, but I wouldn't let it go past, 7 days. I think you've got to make sure that you're talking to these folks. But the last thing you want to do is go dark.
So that I understand what we're talking about, though, you're talking about a tenant defaulting to a landlord and then that trickling back to the lender?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of landlords calling their banks proactively.
Early.
Before tenants have even given them any notices, because they're preparing for that. And I know in one instance, there's a bank here in town that does a lot of real estate deals, and they've been very lenient with their borrowers who have been in good standing, trying to weather the storm with them rather than just holding their feet to the fire. So I'm seeing a lot of proactivity between the landlord, the building owners, and the banks trying to deal with that problem together. Occasionally you'll have a tenant that takes advantage, and that's kind of an exception to the rule right now. I think most people are actually damaged by this. And I see lenders very much cooperating. And that goes back to the very beginning of this conversation. Part of the extra runway that banks have right now is the result of the lowering of rates and giving them the ability to create some runway for themselves. And it's for dealing with this kind of stuff.
And they have the relaxed rules by the FDIC and other Fed agencies and other directives. So they don't have a lot of pressure on them right now. And so they're very forgiving.
Banks still are lending though, AJ. Banks have not stopped lending. Their underwriting the scrutiny's gone up. They're really looking at the financials and the borrower and looking at whether or not they can weather the storm. And there's, like I said earlier, there's talk about debt coverages adjusting, that kind of thing, but banks are absolutely still lending. And they're doing it both on the owner user SBA side, 504 and 7A. And there's also conventional financing available. We're doing deals right now between 3 million and 20 million of those active deals that remain. And nobody seems to be backing out. They're asking more questions.
Interesting. Henish, I know you do a little bit of work on the residential side with workouts and things like that. What are some of the programs that are available on the lender side for loan workouts on the residential side?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's kind of offering blanket deferrals. Like out of curiosity, I inquired with my lender. I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And they just responded back like, you've been approved for a deferral. I'm like, I didn't even apply, but thanks for the blanket deferral. I still sent my payment in when I found out that they were going to count it as a forbearance account. But, I wanted to inquire and see if they were going to give me an option. But there's so many different servicers out there, and there's no black and white rules. So they're kind of making judgment calls, right? That bank that I called 3 weeks ago, they're like, we don't know. We don't have anything yet. And then 2 days ago, they said, your deferral has been approved. And I didn't even apply for one, so they just kind of, I don't know if they just blanket sent that out to everyone. So people are getting the opportunity to miss their payments without it being reported or affecting your credit score. But like I said, I think that that's going to turn into issues when your new lender is doing a verification of mortgage or checking your bank statements and seeing that if those payments were made those months, then you can't report that you missed 0 payments, right? And that's going to be the issue. That's the crystal ball in the future of whether they're going to forgive you for missing these payments during this period.
Yeah, no, it's back to that question is what happens when we hit the brick wall, when the forbearance is up or the time is up.